literary legends and luminaries. Since Christmas is just around the corner, this will be a Throwback Thursday episode of Booksmart with a classic. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I hope you're not rolling your eyes. If you are, allow me to persuade you to read, or maybe even reread, this classic. No other movie has more remakes than A Christmas Carol, certainly no other holiday movie. Dickens wrote the book in 1843, but not for holiday tidings. He wrote it as a societal message to the poor working conditions in Britain at the time, hence the Cratchits and Scrooge. I wonder what he would think about its continued popularity today. I was exposed to A Christmas Carol when I was just 6 years old. Disney released Mickey's Christmas Carol in 1983. It became my all-time favorite holiday program, even beating out the adored Rudolph. Frosty the Snowman was annoying, and I was not a Charlie Brown fan. My favorite Christmas story was The Gift of the Magi, but then I found this book on one of those scholastic school book orders that you get at school, and it became my favorite Christmas book as well. The reading level was way below me by that point, but I didn't care. It was Mickey's Christmas Carol after all. While I love animals, I was never a fan of Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. Bambi, yes. Mickey, no. But I loved the story. My mom always watched the 1951 black and white version of A Christmas Carol when it was on TV. It had that creepy Cratchit-looking guy, and I remember when they passed around the plum pudding, one of the guests stuck his fingers in it and to test it out first and then passed it on. Even before my germaphobe days, I thought it was gross. So it was Mickey's Christmas Carol that introduced me to the whole story, a story I absolutely adored. I cried when Bob placed Tiny Tim's little crutch on his grave. I was upset when networks stopped playing Mickey's Christmas Carol. I think you had to have the Disney Channel or something. Someone gave me the movie on VHS so I could watch it. I remember still watching it when I was in high school. I was an adult well into my 30s before I actually read the original story. In college, I had been exposed to excerpts of A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations, neither of which resonated with me at the time. Dickens seemed a bit pretentious and overblown. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Yeah, great line. But in high school and college, it didn't interest me. Although ironically, such a statement fit perfectly for high school and college experiences. Even now, I have both books sitting in my school office, yet I still haven't read them. I just might one of these days. But when I read A Christmas Carol, I was shocked that it was barely 100 pages long and that it was an incredibly easy read. Not highfalutin at all. This is a crappy copy I found at a used bookstore. I look all the time for an old copy since this is one of those books that I think would be fun to have an old copy of, a little hardbound book with a plain cover. I don't like when books have more than one book in it, when they give you like this thick version of all their stories. I don't want other Dickens work in the same book. I've debated about buying one of those pretty editions that Barnes & Noble has, but I haven't seen A Christmas Carol the past couple of years. At least my store hasn't carried it. If anyone out there knows where I can get an old hardbound version of A Christmas Carol that isn't thousands of dollars, as I've seen a few first editions that appear to be worth a pretty penny, let me know in the comments below. But back to the story. Disney's 30-minute version captured most of the story well, minus the dinner at his nephew's house during his Ghost of Christmas Present visit. All the main components are there, presented well enough that Dickens probably wouldn't mind, although I wonder what he would think of his characters being represented by mice and ducks and, well, crickets. What is best about the book? It's not even about Christmas. Christmas merely serves as the backdrop for the story, the setting, which adds to the conflict and serves as a catalyst for change. You don't have to celebrate Christmas to relate to the book. The story is really about us as we operate within society. So in case you aren't familiar with the story, here's a brief summary. Scrooge is greedy and mean, but he wasn't in his younger years. Bob Cratchit works for Scrooge, who pays him next to nothing. Cratchit has multiple children, but his youngest is very ill. They are poor despite Cratchit's full-time employment. Scrooge bah humbugs Christmas and, well, everything. On Christmas Eve, the ghost of his former business partner, Marley, shows up and tells Scrooge he's living his life all wrong, but he still has time to change. 3 ghosts visit Scrooge that night. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. Each ghost brings Scrooge to a scene to show him the error of his ways. And in the end, Scrooge changes for the better. Let me read you the first couple of paragraphs of the book, as the narrator is not a character, but more of a ghostly figure himself, sort of a disembodied voice that relays the story to us, a strategy voice uses for The Gift of the Magi as well, which was written about 50 years after A Christmas Carol. And so here's how A Christmas Carol starts, and it's called Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind. I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residually legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. It's not what you would expect from A Christmas Carol and from the likes of Charles Dickens, but he was a genius for creating the story and writing it in that manner. It's simple when you think about it. The story is an excellent message on an individual level, but also a corporate one. Dickens' message regarding money and happiness is important. The Cratchits are incredibly happy despite their meager wages and lack of just about everything, while Scrooge is rich and miserable and alone. And it's one of those stories that applies to everyone. It appeals to adults and children. You can see yourself in Scrooge even if you're not really a Scrooge, because I think we all have little slivers of Scrooge in us. Since it's so relatable, you can take much from this book, even if you aren't greedy and materialistic or a corporate leader. It's about reflecting on your past, being mindful of your present, and thinking about how all of that will affect your future. It's never too late to change, to form a different mindset, to alter your career path, to prioritize your passions, and most importantly, to recognize how what you do in this life affects others, both on an intimate scale and potentially a much more global one. And if you do celebrate Christmas, well, maybe it will give you a little bit more of that Christmas spirit back. These are the self-help books I love, the ones that are stories, that are social commentaries, but are not found in the self-help section. A Christmas Carol is the kind of book that will make you feel good after reading. Because it's such an easy read, when I used to have book club at the Juvenile Detention Center where I teach, we always read A Christmas Carol as the last one of the calendar year right before holiday break. In class, I always showed Mickey's Christmas Carol since it's only 30 minutes long in case students aren't familiar with the story. Over the years, I've had them write journals or create their own books where they pick their own ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future and write about the scenes their ghosts show them. I used these little board books one year, so I made myself an example to show them. I haven't looked at it in years, but when I reread it, applying the whole visiting ghost concept and mindset and change, well, it turned out rather well. My students' versions are always profound and deeply moving too. My ghost of Christmas present was my childhood dog, Elsa, because I love animals so much. My ghost of Christmas present was my mom, who died almost 14 years ago of cancer. And then my ghost of Christmas future was Sylvia Plath. This is a fun exercise to do. Not only did it allow me to write specific scenes using dialogue and setting, but it forces you to think about how you are now and how you can be. I would highly recommend it, for that's what good books do to us. They force us to rethink the world in which we live and how we live in it and who we are as people. Books should make us smarter in some way, shape, or form. A Christmas Carol accomplishes this easily. If you are one who rewatches one of the many versions of A Christmas Carol movie every single year for the holidays, maybe this year read the book instead. It probably won't take you much longer to read the book than to sit through the movie. Let me close this episode of Booksmart with the last couple of paragraphs in the story. I've already said it's a happy ending, so I don't feel like reading the ending will overly spoil it for you because, well, it is a Christmas story after all, and it would be horrible to end awfully. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterward. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Happy holidays! And as always at Booksmart, my goal is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.